AMD's launch of the RX 7600 has been an absolute mess this week, and I'm actually re-recording this intro to just include some extra context onto our original video, and it also looks like everyone else is going through the exact same thing.
AMD's launch of the RX 7600 has been so disastrously messy behind the scenes.
The good thing about the 7600 is that this is still a card worth paying attention to, especially for you budget ballers. This was my opinion before we had any pricing information for this card whatsoever, and now it's my same opinion after we have the pricing, at least the pricing of the reference models. And thankfully, most of my video doesn't have to change, but if you do see this shot here where I'm wearing this shirt and a slightly trimmer beard, you'll know that this is all extra information that I added after our initial review. Today's video also won't be focusing on any of the higher level problems or incompetence that may be happening over at NVIDIA or AMD this week. This is all going to be from a casual gamer's perspective of someone who's thinking about gaming with the RX 7600. And speaking of gaming with this new GPU, today's video is sponsored by World of Tanks, and that would be a great option to fire up with your new hardware. And they're hooking you guys up big time with the link in the code down in the description. World of Tanks is a free-to-play game that can be enjoyed by rookies who don't even know how to drive a car yet, all the way up to the experienced tank simulator drivers. There's literally over 100 million players in this huge global community, and the reason why there's so many people is because of the huge tank arsenal, massive battles, and the historical accuracy. As far as tanks go, there's literally over 800 different models, so there's always a new style of play between the light, medium, and heavy tanks, and there's even tank destroyers and artillery to go against as well. There's over 40 different battle arenas, so the maps always seem fresh, and these tanks are actually authentic models to make you feel like you're an actual real tank commander and swaying the outcome of a war. Head on down to the description and use code COMBAT to get 7 days worth of premium access for free, and you'll also start with 250,000 credits, the premium tank Cromwell B, and also 3 rental tanks for 10 battles each. Don't miss out on this amazing opportunity to join the huge global community of World of Tank players and experience the thrill of tank warfare like never before. And real quickly, I do want to rant just for a quick second because this GPU launch was not a smooth one to say the least. See, I even started our original video off talking about all the frustrations of this GPU launch. It hasn't been a fun week for GPU reviewers. The driver was the biggest roadblock that we faced, and we actually got the GPU over a week ago before the launch, but up until this point, including when this video goes live, we still actually haven't got an official driver for it. The people that I know went dark on me right after they sent the card, and the only reason I have a driver is because Mark from Scattervault sent me an unreleased driver from AMD, and this video would not have been possible without him at all.
Thank you, kind sir.
My rep also said that they were originally sending a 7600 XT, and then this 7600 showed up. To this day, I still have no clue if a 7600 XT is actually coming or not. Maybe he fat fingered it. I have no idea. Basically, I was just sent this card, given zero details or information about it, and here we are trying to make a video about it. But again, Power Color did send us the card over a week ago, so thanks to them for at least sending this over, but this was kind of chaotic to say the least. Moving on to the important stuff, let's take a quick look at this Power Color Hellhound model specifically before we do anything else. This card here is rocking 8 GB of GDDR6 VRAM. VRAM is important these days with how games like The Last of Us and Halo Infinite are requiring a ton, and honestly, that's all that's really said on this box. I wasn't given any spec sheet or reviewer's guide for this card, but here's what GPU-Z is telling us. It's got a 2283 MHz core clock, it boosts up to 2693 MHz, and the memory is clocked at 2250 MHz. From all the leaks that I saw online over the last week or two, these are pretty much the same exact results. Nothing's really changed. Now, in terms of power, the box does say that they recommend a 600 watt power supply, but unfortunately, we were unable to measure the consumption ourselves due to the lack of time. Honestly, with any of these mid-range GPUs, just make sure that you get a tier A or tier B model using the PSU tier list and get one that has at least 600 watts and you'll be perfectly fine. Don't overthink this at all. Now, one thing that you may have noticed already on this box is the color scheme, and aside from the typical Hellhound icy blue logo, we now have a brand new purple scratch mark here, and that actually hints at a new feature. There's now an LED switch on the card itself with 3 different positions. You have the icy blue look, which most people use, and it looks awesome. You can turn it off completely, and now there's a third purple option as well. Although full RGB support would have been dope, I do still love these options, not only because they all look sick, but also because these Hellhound cards are always one of the cheapest models available, and I love to see improvements like this being made. This color switch does change the eye color on the backplate as well. I think the purple eye mixed with the blue logo looks fire. And before getting into the actual testing of the card itself, I want to quickly touch up on how this is actually a really weird time for this GPU launch, and no matter how good these benchmarks look, you may actually still want to wait until July. As you probably already saw by the time you're watching this video, the RTX 4060 Ti launched, which is priced at $399 and $499, and you probably already know everything about that GPU already. Now, that 4060 Ti probably won't impact your purchasing decision on a 7600 because that card is about $100 or $200 more than this card, at least what we think this card is going to be priced at. RIP to the 4060 Ti, by the way. I think there might be like 6 people on the entire planet that actually buy that graphics card. However, the RTX 4060 was also announced last week, and that card launches later in July, but that card is probably going to directly compete with this 7600. Knowing Nvidia, they'll probably be doing everything in their power to make the 4060 beat the 7600 on paper in terms of value, so unless you're in desperate need for a GPU right now, or if you don't have faith in proper pricing from Nvidia, then I'd probably recommend holding off on a GPU upgrade for another month or two. So as of Monday, AMD slashed the price of the 7600, at least the reference design, down to $269, and I would guess that this most likely means that they know the RTX 4060 is going to beat this card in terms of performance, which is why they had to lower the price. But now it's time to get into some testing of the RX 7600, and we're also going to be testing it with 2 other graphics cards that are in the same price comparison, as well as GPUs that I think should just be compared against it if you're thinking about picking this up. First, we have this XFX RX 6650 XT, and I just made a dedicated video about this one in my RTX 3060 versus 6650 XT video, which you can find in the upper right hand corner. I like this card as a comparison because before our testing, this is the card that I wanted a 7600 to beat, and if it doesn't beat it, then the generation improvement will be pretty bad. The other card we're testing is the RTX 3060 Ti, and that's because we already know that even the 6650 XT is better than the 3060, and in terms of pricing, we can't really compare a 7600 to an RTX 3070. The 3060 Ti is also a great comparison because we now know it's the same performance as the 4060 Ti pretty much. Again, RIP to the 4060 Ti. Now, the rig we're testing these 3 cards in is right here, and you can probably notice that this is using a literally brand new Corsair case, which is the 2000D, but we'll talk about that after the GPU testing. Just know that we tested with an Intel i5 13400F and 32 gigabytes of DDR5. This obviously isn't the 100% most ideal CPU for GPU testing because it will be limiting on the CPU-bound titles in 1080p, but I'd personally rather test with the CPU that you're actually going to use with these cards as opposed to something like a 13900K. The 13400F is probably the most realistic option that you would be using with these mid-range GPUs, so that's why we're using it today. And finally, the driver that we're using is version 23.110.01.16, which is dated for May 15th, and again, the only reason I have this is because of Mark. I have no clue if we're going to see an updated version of this driver either this week or next week. At the time of recording, this is the most updated driver that we have available. And without further ado, let's jump into some games that you'll most likely be playing, and then we'll show the bigger charts. Starting with Apex Legends, we put the settings at 1080p very high, and as you can see, the 7600 scores a solid 20 FPS more than the 6650 XT, which is what we wanted to see, and then it's 27 FPS slower than the 3060 Ti. Next up, we have Grand Theft Auto 5, and with the settings at 1080p very high, we got very similar results. The 7600 scores a bit over the 6650 XT, and then the 3060 Ti gets about 20 frames higher than that. Modern Warfare 2 followed up after that, and while using 1080p and ultra settings, here we have a bit weird of a result. We got a similar score with the 6650 XT and 3060 Ti, and then the 7600 scored about 20 FPS higher than that. Not really sure what could have caused this, but definitely something to keep in mind. Fortnite was up next. Again, we're testing games that are the most played first, and in 1080p with pro settings, all 3 of these GPUs got clearly high enough numbers, and you probably can't see the difference between any of them. Same thing with Valorant. We see the normal progression here from 6650 XT to the 7600 to the 3060 Ti, but again, you won't be able to see that kind of a difference. And finally, we have 3D Mark's Time Spy. This also tests the entire system as well, but we got the same level of progression. According to this, the RX 7600 is an 11.4% increase over the 6650 XT, and then the 3060 Ti is a 7.2% increase over the 7600. And here's some more charts for you to take a look at as well. Almost every single one of these shows the exact same thing with a 10 to 15% increase from the 6650 XT to the 7600, and then the 3060 Ti a bit higher than that. We do have another outlier in Ark Survival Evolved, just like we did with Modern Warfare 2. The 7600 actually got higher than the 3060 Ti. Forza Horizon 5 shows that we're CPU bound for that title with the 13400F, and pretty close to the same thing with Far Cry 6. Also, shout out to both Ark Survival Evolved and Rust being featured here. These 2 games were easily the most requested from you guys in the comment section over the last year or so I'm happy that we finally ponied up and made it happen. Continue to let us know what you want to see tested, por favor. But now that we see the performance, it's definitely time to talk about the pricing, because here's where things could actually still be a huge debate, because as of the time of recording this video right now, I have no clue what the price of the 7600 is going to be. And as an update, it's currently Wednesday morning, and we still don't know what the price of this specific graphics card is going to be or any third-party manufacturer cards. We know AMD's reference design is now going to be $269, but we don't know what the price of the other cards is going to be. Even if I got an MSRP, we all know that doesn't necessarily mean that will be the price that we see on places like Amazon, Newegg, and Micro Center. As of the week that we're recording this though, RX 6650 XTs and this XFX model specifically is right at $250, and most models are around $260 to $270. For 3060 Ti's, those are starting at $390 right now, and most are around $400 to $420. And with that, it's nice to see the RX 7600 beating the 6650 XT in terms of performance and then slightly under the 3060 Ti, because the expected price of this card is between $250 to $300. This means that unless the card comes right up there at the top at $300, then most likely this card is going to be a solid pickup in terms of price or performance. Again, AMD slashed the price of this down to $269 at the very last minute, and Steve from Gamers Nexus makes a really good point about how this is BS for content creators and media.
And it is therefore indirectly bad for consumers, because what it does is it puts us in media, all of us, in a position where we cannot possibly perform our best work if the price is changing like that.
However, I do like seeing that AMD made an adjustment to price at the last second to make their card relevant to us consumers. I think that's a good thing. If it's at $250 to $275, then yes, you absolutely should buy this newer card over the 6650 XT. However, if it's closer to $300, then we'll need more benchmarking, because that's RX 6700 level of pricing. The 6650 XT, 6700, and 6700 XT cards are all dropping in price lately, so only buy the RX 7600 if it makes sense in terms of price performance against those 3 GPUs, and then don't forget about the RTX 4060 launching in July as well. Now finally, the last thing I want to dive into is this new testing rig, because we have some brand new products that just launched this week as well. Shout out to Corsair for making practically this entire build possible. They supplied almost everything here. The case that we're using is the brand new 2000D, love the name by the way, and it makes sense because it's a smaller ITX version of their case lineup. Does this mean that we'll see a micro ATX 3000D in the near future? Honestly, that would only make sense, so Corsair, you better make that happen. But yeah, this 2000D is rocking mesh on literally every side, so it certainly has plenty of airflow, and the GPU specifically has a ton of room to breathe in here as well. This case definitely has some NZXT H1 vibes with the vertical layout, and this comes in 2 different versions, one with 3 pre-installed RGB fans and one without. And speaking of fans, Corsair also sent out these AF120 RGB slim fans, which look amazing, but with the chaos of this GPU launch video, unfortunately we weren't able to get these installed in the build. We realized a few days ago that it was getting to be crunch time, and we had to get this testing done for the cards, so we had to build only a minimal viable build for our testing and leave some things out. These fans look super sick though with their 15mm slim profile, and this case would have looked even better with the whole thing equipped with them, but again, we ran out of time. I kind of feel bad because Corsair sent out some other products as well, such as this AIO for us to use, but we just didn't have the time to get everything installed in here. We ended up just using the stock cooler on the 13400F, and we tested to make sure that wasn't a limiting factor with our testing, which it wasn't. And that WD Blue SSD that you see in here is just what we use for massive benchmarking runs. Corsair did hook us up with this MP600 Pro LPX 2TB drive, which is blazing fast and much better. Here's the full parts list of everything inside this build, and we actually will be selling this with the RX 7600 for a really cheap price over on zttbuilds.com. This will go live on our upcoming June 1st restock, and we'll probably have this build listed up there for like $750 or so. You know, we always sell these for less than the cost of the parts. Big thanks to Corsair for making all of this possible. And big thanks to Power Color for sending us over this 7600 in the first place. And if you want to see some other relevant GPU comparisons that I uploaded literally just last week, then feel free to click the video that's on the screen now.